Welcome back everyone, it's Vaz again with another video from World of Warships Legends. And today we have another versus for you. In versus, I compared two similar and readily available ships to determine if one is better than the other. Again, for now, I won't be comparing campaign ships or ships that have to be purchased with doubloons. For example, no John Bart, Duke of York, or a Sashio, because the average person who starts playing a month from now can't get those ships unless they open their wallet, or they perhaps can't get them at all. So I don't know if that's really fair, unless there's a very big demand for a particular versus, then of course, we're gonna do it. Now today we have a showdown of two Tier 5 Imperial Japanese destroyers, both of which can be researched in the tech tree. It's the fan favorite Fubuki against the newcomer Hatsuharu. Is there a reason to go with one over the other? Let's find out. Starting with a quick overview, the Fubuki was the lead ship in the Fubuki class of destroyers and was commissioned in 1928, while the Hatsuharu was the lead ship in the Hatsuharu class of destroyers, and it was commissioned in 1933. Was there any difference between the ships? Well, the Hatsuharu was slightly smaller at 109.5 meters long, while the Fubuki was 118 meters long. The Hatsuharu's guns were also dual purpose and could engage enemy aircraft, but it did have two other separate guns dedicated to AA as well. We'll have more on that later. And so we'll start with the upgrade screen. From now on, I'll refer to the Hatsuharu as the Hatsu, so you don't have to hear me stumble through Hatsuharu 1,000 times. Both ships have 2 starting slots and 3 unlockable slots. In slot 1, we have the usual upgrades. They are Aiming Systems Mod 1 or Main Battery Mod 2. For most destroyers, you're going to want to choose Aiming Systems Mod 1, and that's because of the 20% reduction in the torpedo launcher traverse speed. Main Battery Mod 2 also increases your reload time, which is a negative that doesn't outweigh the positive of the battery traverse speed. In slot 2, you have the option of Steering Gears Mod 2, Propulsion Mod 2, or Damage Control System Mod 2. The choices are up to you, but I'd recommend either Steering Gears or Propulsion, as both will improve your destroyer's maneuverability. When I first started playing destroyers, I was always choosing the Steering Gears mod, but recently I've been choosing the Propulsion mod. And that's just a personal preference. I like the stop and go gameplay a little bit more. But again, both are good, so it's entirely up to you. And then we have our 3 upgradable slots for torpedoes, range, and the hull. They're all straightforward and I'd recommend all of them, but do take note of the typo under the Fubuki's torpedo damage on this screen. It reads 16795, which is a mistake. We will see the correct number when we get to the torpedo stat screen. And here we have the loadout screen. Now everything is exactly the same on both ships with the exception of the smoke generator. The Fubuki's smoke screen dispersion time is 4 seconds longer than the Hatsu's. Now when you take into consideration that there are 2 of these consumables, that adds up to 8 seconds, and that extra 8 seconds of smoke does give the Fubuki a bit of an advantage, creating a larger smoke screen. Now personally I think that is not much of an advantage, but spoiler alert, it's not going to matter, so we're going to give the first point to the Fubuki. And now onto the stats screen. I have placed a low-level battleship commander on both ships, so we'll be able to look at both of their base stats. First up is survivability. You can see that the Fubuki has 1200 more hit points than the Hatsu, so right off the bat, that's a second point to the Fubuki. You can see that both have the same armor, but we will discuss that further in the armor viewer screen. And now here we have artillery. You can see that the Fubuki has 3 turrets with 2 guns each, while the Hatsuharu has 3 turrets, one of them of which only has 1 gun, while the other 2 have 2 guns each. Now you'd think that'd be a big deal, but when you combine the Hatsuharu's decreased reload time with the fact that their shell damage is exactly the same, their damage per minute actually works out to be exactly the same. Now both ships have a very similar firing range. And in my opinion, 300 meters is not enough to warrant a point. However, the Fubuki's turret traverse time is nearly 8 seconds better than the Hatsu's, which is a big advantage and that warrants a point. Now here we have arguably the most important part of a Japanese destroyer, the torpedoes. First off, you'll see that the damage stat for the Fubuki is correct on this screen. It is exactly the same as the Hatsu's at 16,267. All other stats are exactly the same. There is one glaring difference though. The Fubuki has one additional torpedo launcher. You'll see at the top there, 3x3, whereas the Hatsu only has 2 torpedo launchers with 3 torpedoes each, 2x3. This means that the Fubuki has 3 more torpedoes than the Hatsu's, giving it a distinct advantage. Now I have to say, I don't know why Wargaming made this choice. Through my research, I did find out that the Hatsu had 3 torpedo launchers, the same as the Fubuki. By shorting the Hatsu an entire torpedo launcher, it really puts it in a disadvantaged position. Now, since we're talking research, we'll just quickly comment on the AA potential of both ships. We don't have the stats in game yet, although I do imagine we'll have them soon. However, historically, the Fubuki class theoretically had up to 32 AA guns. Now this was because certain ships in the class had different upgrades at various times. Now this means we'll have to wait for the stats to be released in the game so we can see exactly how many AA guns the Fubuki has been given. Now as I did mention earlier, the Hatsuharu's guns were also dual purpose and could engage enemy aircraft, but it did also have 2 other separate dedicated AA guns. Now that that's out of the way, we can turn to maneuverability. Here we have the Hatsu's very first point with a better speed of 1.5 knots. And we'll consider the Hatsu's better turning circle and the Fubuki's better rudder shift a wash. And that brings us to concealment. The Fubuki pretty much beats the Hatsuharu in every department, warranting it a point. And this was quite interesting considering I mentioned earlier the Hatsuharu is actually a shorter and smaller ship than the Fubuki. And now that we've finished with the stats, I can't help but bring up the trend we've noticed here. Wargaming is clearly set out to make the Hatsu inferior to the Fubuki. We'll touch more on that in the summary. Moving over to the fancy new armor viewer, both ships are made of industrial strength aluminum tinfoil, which means you won't be resistant to very much incoming damage. Now here we have my recommended commander for these 2 ships, Tanaka. The inspirations I have chosen are Bay and Sims. Sims mostly to help cancel out the hit point reduction caused by choosing Fragile Threat. In addition to choosing Fragile Threat, I recommend Subservice Venture, Back in Stock, and Destroyer Be Destroyed. Now when it comes to the 3rd commander slot, all 3 are pretty good. It's really up to your personal preference, but I do prefer Back in Stock myself. And when it comes to the 4th slot, I was tired of having a very slow Yadachi, although Smoke on the Water is an okay skill as well. For the legendary skill, I recommend Unstoppable as it is invaluable to destroyers, so you're not such a sitting duck when you get your engines or steering gears knocked out. So that brings us to our summary. The Fubuki does have higher hull points, better turret rotation, more torpedoes, and a better concealment, while the only reason to choose the Hatsu would be its slightly increased speed. In the end, this just makes the Hatsuharu more redundant than anything. It's not to say it's a bad ship, it's just that there's no real reason to play a weaker version of the same Tier 5 destroyer other than to unlock the next ship in the line. Why Wargaming made the Hatsuharu so similar yet weaker to the Fubuki in almost every category, it's something that I just can't answer. What do you guys think? Leave your thoughts and comments down below. And so there you have it, our clear winner, the Fubuki. If you did like that video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. Feel free to hit that subscribe button if you want to see more of my videos. And as always, stay healthy and do what makes you happy.